one is better.
We may have a new contender for best day at work ever. Welcome back to Drive Reviews. You've caught us mid-comparison test this time. Josh and I are thrashing out a luxury medium SUV comparison between the new Mazda CX-60 and the Lexus NX 350F Sport. Don't forget that you can find all of the details on these vehicles and every other new car on the market in Australia over at drive.com.au. But in the meantime, sit back and enjoy the show. On this week's episode, James looks into towing with a mid-sized SUV. We also have a look at one of Australia's best-selling EVs, the Tesla Model 3. Up first though, Kez takes the Land Rover Defender off-road.
When I was a kid, I had a Land Rover Defender, not unlike this one. It was part of a NASA rocket launcher kit and it came with a Peterbilt truck and a Chevy Caprice. And despite growing up in the country, Land Rover's icon wasn't particularly common, and back then, wasn't particularly iconic either. It was just a simple workhorse. It's no secret that when Land Rover launched the new Defender in 2019, it maintained some of the old styling features of the original car, but otherwise turned the recipe inside out. It's still compact, but this time it's much more comfortable. And while it's still capable, it's also much more technologically advanced. And that's why I'm here in a much bigger sandpit than I ever could have imagined as a kid to find out whether the 2023 Defender 90 lives up to my childhood aspirations. To give this car its full title, the Defender you see here is a 2023 Defender 90 SE P400. In this instance, 90 refers to the short wheelbase three-door body, SE is the mid-range trim level, and P400 points to the 400 horsepower turbocharged straight-six engine under the bonnet. That's 294 kilowatts in metric figures. The car you see here wears a $106,320 sticker, and that's before options, of which there's a few. There's a bright pack for chrome on the grille and the front and rear skid plates, a towing pack for the tow bar, advanced tow assist and upgraded terrain response system, air suspension, a cold climate pack, with a heated steering wheel, heated seats, a torque vectoring differential, a clear sight exterior mirror, and a handful of other minor touches, bringing the total to just over $122,000 plus on-road costs. It can be a little bit hard to get a sense of scale for the Defender until you see one in the metal, but once you're in here, you actually discover that it's a pretty spacious thing overall. There's lots of room for the front seat occupants. I've got way more headroom than I could ever need, and plenty of wing room as well. I'm sitting in a fairly wide seat and it's trimmed in acorn leather, but there's some weird kind of spec mismatch inside this interior. There's carpet floor mats fitted to this car, but they're on top of a vinyl floor. There is the leather seats that I mentioned, and they're electrically adjustable, and then you have things like exposed screws in the center console. That console itself too is absolutely huge. It's wide and it's long. You have the option to actually get rid of it entirely and fit the car with a sixth jump seat. But in this car, you get plenty of storage space in there. You get a wireless charge pad, you get cup holders, and under here, there's a giant pass-through where you'd be able to fit a laptop or a small bag. Underpinning the whole dash, there is a exposed powder-coated magnesium support structure. And you can see it with a Defender stamp on that side and in details like the steering wheel and on parts of the doors. And it gives a kind of old school authenticity to the interior that goes with those exposed screws that I mentioned before. It's one of those things that you probably don't really need, but it's that weird balance again between what is luxury and what is old-fashioned, and I think the Defender gets it absolutely right in every aspect. Before we even talk about the rear seat itself, I just want to point these out to you. They're called Alpine lights, and they're a bit of an iconic carryover Land Rover design detail. Don't actually do anything functional, but you can see through them. And they're just like a skylight that made its way from the original Defender into this new generation, which is kind of cool to see. Other than that, the rear seat itself is almost embarrassingly spacious. I've got so much rear knee room here, but headroom maybe not as much up front. And that's because the Defender has stadium seating, which means this seat is much higher than those. That means that I can actually see over the front seats. As well as that, there is a fold-down center armrest, a padded armrest on the outboard side. There's a cup holder down by my feet, and rear seat passengers get air vents plus USB power. So the ride back here is almost as good as what the passengers up front get. The big problem with the short Defender, ironically, is its small boot. If you have a look in there, I've got this much space to load into, and it's about 463 litres in total, but it's worth noting that Land Rover uses a wet measurement, not the same standard as everyone else, so that does sound a little bit generous. The other neat trick that Defenders with air suspension have is that you can lower them from inside the boot, which means if you've got anything heavy or awkward, you can drop this down and you don't have to lift as far. Of course, you don't need to worry about a spare tyre packed under your luggage or underneath the floor. There's a full-size spare on the tailgate, which means that it's exactly the same as the other wheels on the car, but that side hinge tailgate is both heavy and because of its nature, it's not powered, so you kind of have to do all of the heavy lifting by yourself. Not so bad here, but it can be a bit of a pain if you're parked on a hill or if the wind picks up.
After the break, we get the Defender dirty, and still to come, the Tesla Model 3. Thanks for tuning in to Drive Reviews. Now we join Kez as he gets behind the wheel of the Land Rover Defender.
Under the bonnet, there's a lot to unpack. The 3-litre inline 6-cylinder engine features a combination of turbocharging, an electric supercharger, and a 48-volt mild hybrid system, all in an effort to keep consumption low and performance high. The terrain that we're on today is a little bit challenging. You certainly wouldn't want to bring your regular hatchback-based kind of SUV out here, but at the same time, it's hardly scratched the surface of what this car is capable of. If you need a little bit more clearance, you can just raise the air suspension. If the terrain changes and it goes from gravelly to muddy, you can just use the terrain response dial here and set things up the way that you need to at the twist of a button. Everything else is kind of automatic. It picks the right ride height and it tells you if you need to select low range. You don't have to think too hard about taking this car off-road and getting it properly dirty. Being a Land Rover, still got plenty of off-road capability baked in, but this car is absolutely built to be tougher and go further than anything else in the Land Rover stable. See, I've got this theory, and that is that Australians are needlessly obsessed with practicality. I mean, you see it all the time. Coupes selling a fraction of the numbers of hatchbacks, and with SUVs, bigger always seems to be better. But I reckon that's all wrong. In short wheelbase Defender 90 form, this little guy can do everything that its bigger 5-door sibling can. As a matter of fact, with a lighter weight and a shorter wheelbase, it can probably go a little bit further. Despite all of that, it can still seat 5 in comfort. It may not be as practical overall, but given that this car isn't trying to be as utilitarian as its forebear, I think that kind of mix of specification actually works. Hopefully, this car occupies an aspirational place in the minds of a new generation, in the same way that the old one did for me.
Well, I'm cold, it's here, it's winter in Melbourne, it's a pretty miserable day, the car's dirty, so why not hit the road with the family on a great road trip to warmer climes with a caravan on the back? What, I hear you say? That's a Mazda CX-5, a medium-sized SUV, not a double cab ute or a giant 4x4. Surely you can't tow with that. Well, yes you can, and I'm going to show you just how to do it. Now, if you've never done this before, possibly the greatest advance in towing connectivity in terms of technology is this, your reversing camera. It allows you to line up your trailer and your tow ball with pinpoint accuracy every single time. And you can see here that we just take it nice and slow, nice and easy, and we line up to our trailer, and that should do us about there. And we're good to go. Now I have to say that's pretty good even for me. the reverse camera is your greatest tool here. Now, before we lower the trailer onto the car, there is one more weight that we need to discuss. We know that the Mazda can tow 2 ton, and we know that our trailer weighs 900 kilograms, but the important one here is the tow ball down weight. The tow ball down weight is the amount of weight that the tow bar can support pushing down on it, and the amount of weight that the caravan actually is pushing down. For our Mazda, it can support a maximum of 150 kilos being pushed onto the tow ball. For our trailer, it pushes down 115 kilograms. So the trailer is lighter than the Mazda can support, so we're good. But it's a very, very important thing to consider before you even connect up your caravan.
Drive will be right back with more towing tips, and later in the show, we'll test the Tesla Model 3. Welcome back to Drive Reviews. Let's join James as he hitches a caravan up to the Mazda CX-5.
Right, well, the first thing is to lower the trailer onto the car. And you can see our alignment's got us pretty close here. We wind in our jockey wheel, and as soon as the jockey wheel starts to lift up like that, you know that the weight has been taken by the car. We simply connect this up, get that on there. Now, some jockey wheels you can fold away, ours needs to be removed. The next thing to do is connecting your chains. To connect these up, there's a really good tip is to cross them over. So the chain here on the right-hand side comes under and connects to the left-hand side of the car. Now, nearly there, we have to connect up our power. Now, worth noting, because our Mazda has the removable tow hitch, the wiring loom actually lives inside the car when it's not in use. It's not mounted on the outside, but it's this nice flat ribbon cable, so it's easy to close the boot on top of it. Your car may differ, it all depends. Either way, one thing to remember too is that the car tends to come with a 7-pin plug, whereas the caravan, if you're towing something like this, needs a 12-pin plug, because you're not only powering the caravan's brakes and lights, but sometimes you can power some of the accessories and equipment in the caravan as well. Now that we're all connected, we can safely remove the trailer's handbrake, which you must remember to do before you set off. But before we drive anywhere, let's power up the car and check all the lights on our trailer. Now, you would have seen that we turned our hazard lights on. Why did we do that? Well, it means that we can see all of our lights going at once. So you'll see the tail lights are on, our indicators are both on, thanks to the hazards, our number plate lights on. As I walked along the side, I could see the running lights are on the caravan as well. It's worth checking the car at the same time just to make sure that everything is working there. But basically, that's it. Let's get going. Now, before we hit the open road, one of the biggest things to remember when you're towing a caravan is how long you are and also how tall you are. We're about 2.5 meters high, which is good to keep an eye out for bridges. Nothing's going to be that low, certainly not where we're going. But the length of the vehicle, so of the CX-5 and the caravan on the back, is a pretty important thing to remember, especially when turning. Don't turn too sharply when you've got a caravan on the back. You might need to just swing out a little wider before you turn in, or just head a little bit further across before you turn left or right in order to make the turn. And you may notice that while watching this, I am consciously looking at my mirrors far more often than I normally would. And it's not just because my rear view mirror is taken up with the J-Pod behind me. It is just a constant check that you'll find yourself doing with the caravan on the back to make sure that it's there, that everything's behaving itself, that it's staying balanced, but most importantly, that there's nobody next to you if you do need to change lanes, because it's very, very easy to forget that you are longer and think, oh, I need to be over there now, and merge across traffic with the caravan in tow, which can be a pretty bad start to a holiday. So keep an eye on your mirrors, keep an eye on your trailer, and be cognizant of where you're turning, and the rest is a breeze. Well, here we are. We've arrived at our stunning camp spot / car park. The tent is popped, the kitchen's out, and we are ready to settle in for the afternoon. What have we learned today? Well, first of all, CX-5 is a brilliant tower. Not that anyone would have really questioned that. You've got enough power, enough torque, and enough weight balance to manage a van like this. In fact, any medium-sized SUV should be able to handle a van the same size of our J-Pod here, or perhaps even something a bit bigger. Now, if you've watched this and are thinking, today's the day, we're going to go out on an amazing camping adventure, these are the things you need to remember. First of all, check your weights, the weight of the van, the tow rating of the car, and most importantly, the down ball weight on the tow bar itself. Check your leads to make sure that whatever you've got on your car and whatever you have on your caravan are compatible. And of course, remember that you are longer, wider, and taller than you are when you're just a car. So swing wide before turning a corner. Allow decent braking distance and certainly don't drive under any low branches or bridges and you'll be fine out on the road. And with that all set up, with your medium-sized SUV and a suitable caravan, we hope you go and find an even better camp spot / car park than we have.
I suspect you're going to know exactly what this vehicle that is next to me is. It's a Tesla Model 3, and it's not just one of Australia's most popular electric vehicles, it's one of Australia's most popular vehicles full stop. And probably just 5 short years ago, you would have found that very hard to believe. Now today, we're going to take a look at why the Tesla Model 3 is one of Australia's most popular vehicles. And I'll tell you one thing, this is a sedan. It's not an SUV, and Australians keep telling us that they want to buy SUVs in huge numbers and that sedans are done. They're 1990s, they're early 2000s, nobody wants them, they're not practical. Well, the Tesla Model 3 bucks that trend. Let's first take a look at pricing and spec. At the time of testing in July 2023, after a $3,900 price cut on the 1st of July, the rear-wheel drive Tesla Model 3 was listed at $57,400 plus on-road costs, its lowest ever price, or just over $60,000 drive away in New South Wales. That's according to Tesla's website. One thing the automotive world loves, and automotive designers specifically, is a buzzword. Now, as a journalist, I don't love the buzzwords, but the buzzword of the last 5 years or so has been reductive. So let's run through a few things that aren't here. There's not a whole bunch of switches that you don't need. There aren't controls everywhere. There aren't things that are just sticking out for no reason. It's very smooth. It's very minimalist. And the word I'd use is it's very underdone, but I don't mean that as a criticism because, to be honest with you, the lack of switchgear in here and the design itself is quite refreshing. However, there are some drawbacks. The fact that you have to do certain things through these steering wheel rotary dials, a little bit annoying. We don't like the fact that your speedo is up in the top right of this display because you have to keep moving your eye away from the screen to see what speed you're doing. It's silly. There's no need for it. Tesla could have come up with a better solution. Now, that's not a criticism of the screen itself because the screen is massive, it's responsive, it's fast, the software's excellent, it does exactly what you want it to do, and it's not too hard to work out either. The seat itself, not too bad. Headroom's okay, but my head is up in this glass area, so it's up above that line. So when you get in and out, you're going to need to come in over this top of the roof section. You've got plenty of room, you've got air conditioning vents, you've got USB-C chargers. Visibility is pretty good as well. You can see out of the car particularly well, so you don't feel like you're squashed in here. And while I guess the focus of something like a Tesla Model 3 is up there and interacting with all of the controls, it's fair to say that back here, it's pretty comfortable. You can charge your device, not the worst place to spend a longer road trip. Don't go anywhere, there's still more to find out about the popular Tesla Model 3. You're watching Drive Reviews and we're road testing Tesla's Model 3. Tesla Model 3 in its element, rolling around town in silence, doing things that electric cars do particularly well. But as we keep saying with the Model 3, there are certain things that this electric vehicle does better than all of the others, and one of them is the way that it utilises its battery power. So it's frequently common that you'll get this car down into the low 13 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometres in terms of consumption, and some of the competition, they're up at 17 or 18, so this is particularly efficient. Now, it's not perfect. The ride, I guess you could say, is firm, but not uncomfortable. It deals with one sharp hit quite well. So if you hit one of those speed humps, it deals with that particularly well. What it doesn't love is repeated bumps in the road surface. So if you're over a constantly vibrating road surface effectively, it doesn't deal with that particularly well. But a bump like we just went over there, over a speed hump, no problem at all. The way that you interact with the vehicle as a driver, I think, is particularly easy with a Tesla. The steering, the throttle pedal, the brake pedal feel, the way that you can dial in and out what the brake pedal does and the relationship of that to you as the driver, I think, is particularly good with a Tesla. And everything else about the drive experience is really quite inoffensive. It does the city thing particularly well. It's quiet, it's insulated, it's comfortable. And I like the fact that this is a sedan because the driving position is a little bit old school, but parking and maneuverability is excellent because it's not too big. So it's easy to find a parking spot, easy to get in and out of them. This is particularly practical if you're looking for a city-focused electric vehicle.
Tesla does not specify the capacity of the battery. However, multiplying its voltage, 345 volts, as specified in the owner's manual, by its amperage, 173 amps as listed in the Australian government approval documents filed by Tesla, equates to a 59.7 kilowatt hour battery pack. Compared to the WLTP driving range claim of 491 kilometres, we achieved the equivalent of 430 kilometres of real-world range.
Now, it's fair to say when Tesla launched the Model 3 on the Australian market, and in fact when Tesla launched on the market as a whole, there were some issues with build quality, fit and finish and attention to detail. But it's fair to say that that elephant in the room has been ushered right out of there because the Model 3 now is a very, very good vehicle. It's built to a high standard and that's what we expect of a car manufacturer. So Tesla is starting to deliver cars that are built to the standard we would expect from a car manufacturer. So let's park that to one side. And it's very, very easy to tell you after spending a week with the Tesla as we have, why it's one of Australia's most popular electric vehicles. That is because it is particularly good. It's particularly good as a medium sedan, which really does put a knife into the argument that Australians don't want sedans anymore. Secondly, the interactivity and the way that you can interact with the vehicle as the driver is second to none, not just amongst electric vehicles, but amongst vehicles as a whole. Tesla does a particularly good job with the app, with the way it works on your smartphone, with the supercharger network, with the system and the infotainment itself, and the way that you link into the car as the driver. They do a particularly good job, a better job than most other manufacturers, and it's something that a lot of other manufacturers could learn from. Then there's the way that it drives. It's not perfect, the ride is firm, as we said when we were behind the wheel, but it does a hell of a lot of other things particularly well, especially the battery pack that Tesla uses in its cars and the way that the Tesla uses the available power. It's more efficient than most other electric vehicles on the market, and I think that is a real point of note if you are buying yourself an EV. And all of the information, the full review, the Tesla Model 3, that's over at drive.com.au.
Thanks for joining us on Drive Reviews. As always, all the up-to-date news, reviews and comparisons that new car buyers need is at drive.com.au, and we'll see you again next week on Drive Reviews.
Oi, you want the car tonight? You got to earn it. Looking good. Once you're done, you can start on the car.
Times are changing fast. For everything next in cars today and tomorrow, go to Drive and look forward to it.